All right, good morning, everyone. We are live today. Yeah, Joe's here already. But yeah, we got everyone's probably excited to see Sierra here. She's back. It's been a while, and we got first timer Dylan on. And we got Stan back. So, good morning, everyone.
Good
Hey,
morning.
good morning.
Good
Y-
morning.
Yeah, so Dylan, maybe quickly you can kind of give a short backstory of who you
Yeah.
are, your investment portfolio, because some people may not know who you are yet.
Yeah. No, just real quick. I started in 2023. That's just the first time I could save up enough money to get started buying properties. I live here in Indianapolis, Indiana, same place I invest. And I picked up a 3 unit in 2023, rehabbed that one, and then started saving again. I was just house hacking the 3 unit. And then I ended up finding a 12 unit that somebody wanted to sell. And I didn't have the money at the time to buy it. So I ended up finding somebody to partner with. So I have a partner on the 12plex as well. So we're at 15 doors right now. We're trying to get another 20 this year, is our objective.
So people know Sierra's here, it looks like. So we got Hyder stopping by, Richard Riley, Rusty. So good morning, everyone. Sierra, maybe kind of let everyone know what you've been up to and how's everything going with you.
Sure. Yeah. Just kind of grinding away. I think everyone understands the slowness that comes between properties sometimes. So that's kind of the lull that I've been in. Always working on side hustles and stuff like that. So still sticking with that. And yeah, just kind of plugging away.
And of course, we missed you at year two ORAD event. So Dylan was there, and I know Stan's been traveling quite a bit. So what have you been up to, Stan?
Um, More or less what you just said. I've been traveling a fair amount. I've been working a fair amount. We just had Mardi Gras here down in New Orleans, so it's been pretty busy for the last couple weeks. In fact, all New Orleans has been busy for the entire year. Started off the Sugar Bowl for the beginning of the year, then we transitioned right into the Super Bowl, and now we just had Mardi Gras officially ended yesterday. So between just enjoying the general festivities and the work we've had on our Airbnb because we were essentially booked the entire time, been fairly busy, but definitely very, very a lot of positives from that.
Yeah, I know I talked to Ned a few times and even Matt. Did I remember it was the car not bombing, but that attack or what
Yeah,
did
it
it
was.
bother affect you? Yeah.
I didn't. Luckily, it didn't affect us. I was actually offshore on New Year's Eve, so if I was in town, I probably would have been in that area. But yeah, it was a truck attack. Someone took a truck and just barreled it down Bourbon Street around I think 2 or 3 a.m. on New Year's Eve. So that was definitely a very tragic event we had here in New Orleans at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, very crazy times we're in. And then, like with the politics and things going on, people are always maybe looking for scapegoats and whatnot and blaming one side or the other side. I think a big topic right now on social media is maybe housing inventory, housing supply, cost of housing, and investors are the maybe the easiest person to put blame on, right? So that's a great topic Stan brought up. So maybe Stan, you can lead us off on what you're seeing out there and what's your thoughts. Is investors the reason for the housing shortage?
I mean, at the end of the day, there's no way around. There is some factor that we play into it. We are adding additional demand to a market. Whether or not we're the primary cause, that I completely disagree with. That we're the primary driver. I think at the end of the day, it still comes down to a supply issue where uh, there's usually two main arguments I keep hearing about from people who are opposed to the Institute of Landlords at all. One argument that I've heard people make is if there were no landlords, everyone would be able to simply own their home, which I think that part is absolutely false. No matter how much the home prices drop, you're never going to have the prices drop to the point where you'll be able to have housing affordability for every single person that lives in a specific country. There's always going to have to be someone there's always going to be some portion of the population left over that still are not able to purchase a house for themselves, that are still going to need a place to live. Hence, they are going to have to rent that property somewhere. Unless somehow housing drops down to $1 a house, which I definitely don't think is very realistic at all. I think there's always going to be a market need for landlords just to provide housing for people who are not able to acquire housing for themselves.
What about you, Dylan? What's your thoughts on this? I mean, you're the youngest of all of us. So what do you what's your perspective on this?
I definitely have a very similar opinion of this. Like I don't I don't foresee there being a time where everybody owns a house. In fact, like some of the people that I talk to that rent some of the apartments that we manage, a lot of them don't even want some of the responsibilities that come with owning a house. Like people look at the mortgage as like the main thing because, if they're used to paying rent, they're just like, well, the mortgage could be less, but you have maintenance and everything that comes with that too. And I think some people just don't want those headaches. Like I have a lot of elderly tenants that would rather just give me a phone call and I can take care of the problems that they have. And then they don't have to mess with it. They don't have to pay a contractor or anything. Because some of the issues that come up can be extremely expensive. Like I'm doing 4 AC units over the next 2 months. And that's like somebody might have to do one, but that's still $5,000. And with the average American not really being able to come up with $1,000 or $2,000, that's a really big problem.
Yeah, we've actually had an AC problem that came up in the last couple months here as well. So I know that's a very expensive fix that needs to be addressed pretty quickly, especially in our area. Right now, during winter, it's not as bad. But if you don't have a functioning HVAC system here in New Orleans in the middle of summer, that's a absolute health violation. That's an actual like life-threatening danger.
Yeah, no, it's a big problem, and I think on the other side of that, a lot of the issues that come up with housing is it's not necessarily that builders don't want to build. I think there's a lot of issues as far as zoning and dealing with the government because I've looked into development just at some point because I really wanted to build like a new duplex that's like a 3-2 or something like that at some point, and the government bodies that you have to deal with are really difficult to actually figure out how to do that. And they place a lot of restrictions on people that want to build bigger multifamily to like assist in the supply issue that we have with housing.
I definitely agree. I was definitely going to bring that up as well in terms of zoning. I think zoning is a huge problem from twofold. Uh, Part of it is simply being able to build multifamily of any kind at all, even something as simple as a duplex is difficult because so much of the zoning. Luckily, it's not as bad in New Orleans because it's an older city, so we are used to having duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, even, which are much more common here than they are in many other cities across the country. But even here, we have so much of the area that's designated specifically as single family residential only that even if someone wanted to, they would not be allowed to build a multi-family property on there. They'd be stuck with a single family home construction or nothing at all. In fact, one of the very first city council meetings I attended to in New Orleans, I specifically remember there was a person who was trying to petition. He owned 4 lots. They were his own single family. He was trying to petition in order for the city council to allow him to build 4 duplexes instead of 4 single family homes. That way he would get a more reasonable return on his investment with a duplex getting rent that way. So it's a case where if the city simply allowed him to do it, he'd be able. The city itself would have 4 new uh, rental units or 4 new real estate properties where people or families can actually live. The city denied him that. So instead of having 8 additional housing units for people to live in, now we have 4 empty lots that are doing nothing at all for the city. And in the same exact council meeting, they constantly were bringing up the fact that we are in a housing shortage, that we're in a housing crisis. Meanwhile, I was simply sitting there dumbfounded, going, "You guys are causing this. Like, here's your solution. Here's someone with real estate. Here's someone with the assets and financial ability to build housing and alleviate some of this housing. And all the city has to do is step back." Instead, they are acting more as an obstructionist, where they are. I don't think it's intentional. I think they, for one reason or another, they simply are refusing to allow that zoning to alleviate itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sierra, I know, I don't know if your channel is active or still on hold right now, but a lot of times you were doing like a lot of hands-on stuff with renovations and things. So a lot of it too is investors are purchasing properties that need a lot of work. So is that kind of your experience? I mean, was there a lot of work to be done on that property that you purchased and whatnot?
So all of the live-in flips that I've done have needed a lot of work, and the rental was one that had been flipped. It There was work that needed done in it, but not much. Oh gosh. So my experience as far as an investment goes is that I have always put in the sweat equity before I got to a point where, um, okay, moving on. Before I got to a point where I got a property that was just rent ready. Part of that was just wanting the income coming in immediately versus, when you do the live-in flips, like you're kind of hoping for a huge cash out at the end, and with it being your primary residence, you have the tax. That you're not getting if you live in it for 2 years. So that's the kind of the advantage to that. As far as like flipping a property before turning it into a long-term rental, I don't know that that appeals to me much. But when I approach this question, I'm looking at it like a lot of investors are buying multifamily, and I don't know that that takes away a lot of the supply, the single family housing supply. I know there are a lot of single family investors, obviously, but for the most part, when you look at the supply and demand, I mean, most people are wanting a single family house. They're not going to buy a duplex or an apartment complex to live in themselves. So that's kind of the supply issue. And I don't know that investors are taking a ton of that supply away. Again, I think it would be more of a zoning issue and more of an affordable housing issue. There's lots of houses for sale that are just out of reach for most people, especially for a starter home. So I think those are the things that people are looking at. And I know, purchasing half of a duplex back when I bought my first house, that was really unappealing. And I know that for a lot of first time home buyers, that's like the only option to start kind of getting into real estate, is to have their half of a duplex and then hope, that it sells and they can move into a single family house down the road. So anyways, I'm going to let you guys keep going while I catch up on the comments.
Well, we just want to say thank you for stopping by Tarantula Videos. Yes, just be respectful so Sierra keeps coming back on. That's the main thing. But you can have fun, but definitely just be respectful. And Frank's here. What's up, Frank? Thanks for stopping by. And just remember, I put Dylan's channel in the chat, so go subscribe if you can. And also, I don't know if you guys remember John Litz from the other day. We're trying to get him to 50 subscribers so he can start doing live streams. So go please support him also. But yeah, so what else do you guys? I mean, do you think? But let's play contrarian on this. And would you guys? How would you blame? I guess investors, or how would you look at it? Let's say any pros or any reasons to agree with people saying investors are the problem. Any thoughts on that?
To be completely honest, I don't think I wouldn't call it a problem. But at the same time, I think the fact that we are investors, we are also purchasing real estate at the same time, that is going to be an increased demand on housing market, which does have at least some effect on housing prices. It's like anything else with economics, it's supply and demand. If you have the same amount of supply, but you're adding more demand to it by having additional people come into the market and attempt to purchase, that is going to have some factor in driving up prices. But it comes down to, is the demand side completely to blame, or is it the fact that the supply side is not able to keep up with the rising demand? Because most investors, they are still providing housing, even if they're not living in the house themselves. No one's going to, well, I'm sure there's some people who are purchasing properties just to let them sit there. But that's definitely not the majority of investors. Most investors, they're purchasing a property with the intention of putting it onto the rental market and to provide housing for someone to actually live in that house. So it's still even if it's not a property that someone personally is going to live in, it's still providing housing to people who need it. But yeah, like you said, for the contrarian side of it, I think it does have some effect on pushing up housing prices. But I think it's one of those necessary evils where people are still going to have to live somewhere. and there needs to be someone, such an investor, to come in with the capital to make sure that the property is built, that the property is maintained, that the property doesn't go into disrepair and wind up being a one less housing on the market for anyone to live in.
Yeah, I would say one of the problems I would see is, kind of the whole slumlord side of things. That would be taking away housing and not actually providing the service that they're supposed to be providing. So I think a lot of tenants experience that kind of landlording, unfortunately, and I definitely think that is one of the major downsides.
Yeah, I agree with that. Where I think if you are going to provide a housing for someone as a landlord, it is your responsibility to make sure that the house is in good standing. If there's a repair that needs to be made, then that is your responsibility to make the repair, make sure that it is livable. If, like we said earlier, if the HVAC system goes down, you got to fix it. I mean, that's your job as a landlord, is to find the capital to make sure that the house remains in functional shape.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised at some of the like responses I would get from tenants, that they were just astonished at how quickly we would actually get things done for them, because they were so used to dealing with other landlords. Because like when I got into the property space, I came from a marketing background, and I'm just really used to like being really communicative with my clients, and like making sure I'm responding to them really quickly, solving all the problems as soon as we can. So when I got into this space and they were like, I've never had like a landlord that'll fix something same day if there's a problem, or like the next day, I was like, this isn't normal. And I had to talk to some landlord friends that I have, and they're like, no, to be completely honest, a lot of them are terrible, but there's some of us that are really good like that. But you know, just making sure people are like providing what they're supposed to, because I don't know about your guys' leases, but if we don't solve problems in a timely manner for people, they can actually start withholding rent. Like there's a clause in our lease that if we're not maintaining our end of the deal, they don't have to maintain their end of the deal either.
Uh, we don't have that clause in our lease, but we still make it a point to make repairs as soon as possible. Uh, our goal is to always do it within the same day or next day. However, if we're not able to get a contractor in time or a repairman in time, at the very least, we are maintaining communication with the tenants in that case, and we provide not ideal like substitutes, but we make an effort to still make them comfortable. If we can't get a heater repairman to their house within that same day, we have extra space heaters that we provide them instead, just to give them something to get through that day or for the next day. I mean, realistically, repairmen, they're not always going to be available within 24 hours, but we still try to build our network far enough to make sure that if our primary repairman is not available, we have backups that we can call instead to make the repairs as quickly as possible. I'd say probably 90 or 95% of the time we're able to get the repair in there within 24 hours. But every now and then it does wind up dragging a couple of days.
Yeah, I think the communication is really just the biggest piece there. Like, as long as people are being heard and that they know you're working on the problem, that's all it seemed that they really care about. Like, I've had the same issue. I don't know if you guys are having like freezing issues with pipes and stuff. I know we are up here in the north. But I had a few heaters go out, and I had to like get the oil-based heaters, that you plug into the wall and they'll heat up like the whole apartment. I had to get like two or three of those like same day so I could go over there and put them in their apartment, because it was like 56. And I'm pretty sure if it goes under that, like under 55 for a couple hours, you can start getting fined by the city. And I was like, let's solve this really fast.
Luckily, that's not an issue we have too often in New Orleans. We had snow this year, had about a foot of snow, and that set the New Orleans record of all time. I've lived here 15 years in Louisiana. This is the first time I've ever actually seen snow that didn't melt as soon as the sun came up.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
So
wow.
that was quite the experience. The entire city shut down for a week.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you guys don't have the infrastructure to deal with that, like all the salt trucks and everything.
We have no salt trucks, or very limited salt trucks. So anytime there's even a possibility of snow, the city generally shuts down for at least a day. Even if there's a threat of snow, chances are the city is also going to shut down. When we had that, simply the 1 foot of snow, we were like, no one was moving. Everyone was just stayed home for a full week.
So we have a question here from Rusty for Dylan. So he says, Dylan, are you seeing those discounted commercial properties hitting the market yet?
I actually just I have a call with Crexy tomorrow because I'm going to be talking to them about this. I am not. So the way I've been doing it, I don't know if anybody here knows of Cody and Christian from Multifamily Strategy. I'm not in their courses or mentorships or anything. You can learn a lot of stuff from their lives and just YouTube. But I have been just talking to owners. So I'll look for the properties on like Google Maps and some of the other platforms like that, and I'll find the phone numbers or I'll find the LLCs associated with it, and then I'll look up those LLCs to find the people to talk to them directly. And that's the only way I've really been able to make commercial work, because everybody seems to think that they can sell stuff for 5 and 6 cap rates right now, while you're looking at somewhere between a 6 to really a 7, 7.5. And that doesn't really work leverage wise, because you're buying something at a 6 cap and your debt is at a 7. Like, it just doesn't make sense, and we can't make those deals work right now unless there's like a huge value add in terms of how much we can increase the rents. Like, when I bought my property that I bought recently in August, it was a 6 cap, but their rents were about 50% of where the market is, and everybody was on month to month leases. And we just ended up doing Dion's binder strategy with everybody, and we got them up to meet us somewhere in the middle. So we increased rents about 25-30% across the board, and it went from like a 6 to like a 10 cap, and that's cash flowing pretty well right now. But yeah, you're not going to find them on the market on like LoopNet or Crexy. That's kind of where deals go to die, in my opinion.
Uh, yeah, I haven't actually pulled the trigger on a large commercial multifamily yet, but that's definitely a realm that I'm trying to get into. And I've been making the connections. A lot of it does come down to getting to know the actual brokers rather than trying to go on LoopNet or Crexy, or trying to get to know the people in that space so you can directly talk with them for when they're ready to unload a property. You're the first person that they talk to rather than going to LoopNet or Crexy. By the time the properties get to those two sites, chances are they've been looked over by so many different investors, and chances are if those investors didn't see the potential in those properties and passes over, there's likely a reason that happened.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's what I'm seeing. Like, I've seen a few properties on there, but just it's always in the areas in town that I know that I don't necessarily want to manage property, because like we'll buy B and C with the intention of making the C's a B, but like we're not going to buy like a D or an F class property and try to improve that. It's just not my forte. I don't want to be that person.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm kind of the same way. I was looking at a D class multifamily before, and honestly, if it's not an area of town that I feel safe driving to on any given day, I'm not going to purchase in that area.
Yeah. Ideally, I want to be able to walk outside at night, and or like run around because I like going on runs. So like running around the neighborhood at night. Like, if I personally don't feel safe doing that, I don't want to rent a property to other people and expect them to live there too. Just my
But
Kind
with
of like that
the
Denny's location we went to in Vegas.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, so we're trying to move the location. But yeah, so what?
down in New Orleans,
Well, yeah, that's another discussion to be had. But I think Zuber likes it in Vegas because it's easy for him to keep doing it. He's very structured, right? I think so. Have keeping it in Vegas makes things easier for him, and he can just keep improving. But and it's also a good cause for the blind center, so I think that's why he likes to do it there. And if anyone else, I was talking to Dylan, is if anyone bought those hoodies, the white one, I believe those are the ones Sierra made for Zoomer. So they're well made. And if anyone can tell, I'm very congested right now. So I think it's because every time the seasons change, I get very stuffed up and whatnot. But
Whoa,
um,
whoa, whoa. The seasons change in Hawaii?
well, yeah, I
the
mean
season in Hawaii.
it changes. It's changing to spring, so I don't, something is in the air, and it always happens to me.
I thought the seasons in Hawaii were very hot and very hot with some rain.
That is true, but my nose can somehow tell when it's changing. But we got Cody stopping by, BuzzTune. A lot of Jim is here, so yeah. So thanks for stopping by, everyone. Another thing too, right? Like investors. So what do you guys think about like Airbnb, short-term rentals? Are those big cause of the housing shortage, I guess, and prices going up?
I'd be a hypocrite if I said I'm against them simply because I own one in New Orleans. So that definitely kept me very, very busy for the last couple of months with all the events that we had going on. Do I think that's a same kind of comment I had before? It's definitely an additional source of demand on a market. So it is going to have some effect in driving up rental prices and property prices in an area. In terms of how much it drives it up, that's much harder to gauge. Do I think it's a primary cause? I honestly don't think so, because in many cities, the amount of properties that are on the market as Airbnbs or STRs, it makes up a fraction of the total like the real estate market there. I know in New Orleans, we have, I believe, 1 or 2% of the city housing stock is designated as STRs or have permits in there as STRs. So 1% is still an additional demand to the market. Is 1% going to be the main factor that is causing prices to soar up or rent to soar up? I really don't think so. In this area, New Orleans, a much bigger concern that we're currently having is insurance. I know a lot of property owners are essentially they've been forced to increase their rental prices in our area simply in order to compensate for insurance, or they've been forced to go into STRs as a way to combat the insurance prices going up. Uh, but when I first started going in New Orleans, like when I was first buying properties in Lafayette, Louisiana, which is about 2 hours away, the insurance I was looking at was generally $1,000 to $2,000 for the year. So I kind of figured, okay, I'm going to New Orleans. It's going to be more expensive. I figured I'd be looking at something in the $4,000 range. I started getting back quotes for insurance, and instead it was closer to $24,000 for a year.
Oh wow.
And that was actually the cheaper end. I've got other quotes that were in the $30,000 or $40,000 for insurance. And so that's been a huge problem here in New Orleans in terms of providing affordability, not only for people trying to purchase a home to begin with, but people trying to rent, because the people who own those properties aren't renting them out. The insurance prices, they spiked up after our latest hurricane that came through here in, I believe, 2021, where within 1 year the insurance in many cases doubled. So those landlords, they're not going to double their rent because I don't think the market could take that, but they still need to raise rent to some extent in order to try combating that insurance price going up. So that's one of the factors that I think are affecting affordability here to a much higher extent than Airbnbs or STRs.
What about like foreign investors? Do you guys in your guys' markets, do you guys think like foreign investors are a big factor? Like Hawaii, that's something they're trying to have a bill banning foreign investment.
Mm.
It's definitely a tricky question because it's so hard to gauge how much market demand they're adding.
Yeah. Our equivalent of foreign investors here is like people coming from all over the states. And they're like, man, the Midwest is so cheap. So, I mean, we've seen a lot of prices get bid up on both houses and multifamily here. Um, I, I don't know if it was the thing we had going on for the past few years. I'm not sure if we're supposed to mention on a live, but I don't know if that affected pricing a lot because we saw pricing surges around then, but then also just all of the people coming from like California and New York that are just flooding the Midwest to buy properties here. It's definitely increased the prices because I remember when I graduated high school and I was going into college, you could buy a duplex here for like 80K. I just didn't have the 20K to put down on it at the time. So by the time I could buy that same duplex is like 225. So this probably sounds awesome compared to your guys' prices, but like the rents were like 650 aside back then.
That was just like last year for you graduating high school. You're the by far the youngest of everyone. Um,
Yeah, I think it was like 8 years ago or something like that. I'd have to do the math.
I
Yeah,
appreciate that Dylan just called everyone not from the Midwest foreigners and lumped them into that category. Um, I, yeah, I think it's hard to gauge because a lot of foreign investors, do so through a means that is, domestic somehow. So it's sometimes hard to understand when property is purchased and who it's purchased by. I know I've heard a lot of like farmland is especially in the Midwest and is being purchased by foreign investors. Um, Especially in like marijuana growth and stuff like that. So they are investing in those properties for those reasons, but not necessarily housing. I have heard a lot of people will park their money in housing here in the U.S. because it's more stable, and then those are typically properties that are sitting vacant. Um, I just don't. Yeah, I wouldn't know how much of that is factoring in.
the last couple of years, housing prices have gone up, but there's been so many factors that have caused them to go up that's so hard to pinpoint exactly what it is. Like, is the foreign investment having some influence? Probably. Is institutional investment having some influence? Probably. Is insurance having some issues? Probably. Is the fact that we've had a enormous amount of inflation happen within the last 3 4 years? Also probably. So it's very hard to divvy up. Okay, how much of each of these factors is the cause for housing prices being where they're at right now? It's definitely very, very like all of them probably are assigned some blame, but it's very, very difficult to figure out exactly how much of the housing cost increase has gone to inflation, how much has gone to corporate investors, how much has gone to STRs, how much has gone to insurance. Like it's very, very difficult to exactly figure out, like figure that problem out.
yeah, I think a big issue too is some people, only see the sticker price of housing, so they think housing is getting super unaffordable, and it is. But at the same time, I think it kind of blinds people into seeing that their dollar is being devalued, right? So it's kind of an easy way to have people be like, oh, housing is unaffordable, prices are going up, it's super expensive, and they're not seeing how their dollar is being kind of devalued. So it's kind of an easy talking point, right? To blame investors, blame foreign investment, blame short-term rentals. So I think that's the one thing people, like ourselves, is a little bit different, right? Because we're trying to pay attention to the economy a little bit, what's happening in real estate. So we have a different lens on what's going on out there. Um, Anything else you guys want to talk about on this any discussion, this part, or you guys want to pivot to something else you're working on, or
I
Actually, what? Sorry, go ahead, Dylan.
I was just gonna say one thing that I think people should really pay attention to when they're like blaming landlords, whether it's single family or otherwise, for increasing pricing, is they should really pay attention to like the conditions we get these properties in. Because I don't know about you, Sierra, you were talking about live-in flips. Like we're buying stuff that is like uninhabitable in a lot of cases. Like for example, one property I had, this person had like multiple dogs in there, and the dogs did not get let out very often. So what I ended up having to do was rip all of the floors out and kills the ceiling wall, like with oil-based kills, the floor walls and everything, to like make this an apartment that was not, because this apartment was actually like the smell was so bad it was going into the other two apartments and they could smell it too. So not only was it terrible for this tenant to live in this condition, but it was also terrible for the other two people that lived at the property as well. So I think that's a huge piece. Like we put a lot of money into properties to make them like as nice as possible for the people that are residents. And I think just looking at, that we own the properties in the first place and not liking that is doesn't make as much sense to me.
I've had a similar situation here with the property I'm living in right now. It's a fourplex. I live in it, and when we bought it, the reason that we were able to purchase at the price we did is because the curb appeal was non-existent. The house when we bought it, a lot of the siding, like it was wood siding, that was the original siding. I'm willing to bet it was the original siding from the house was built in 1911. A lot of the wood was rotting. A lot of the paint was missing. There was no landscaping. Essentially, if the house had kept going in that same condition, it probably would have only had another 10 years maybe of usability. As soon as we purchased the property, all the siding was replaced with brand new hardy plank. We put a lot of work into the property, not just to make it look better, but to stabilize it, to keep it from deteriorating further. So, because we took over a property in that condition and we made those repairs, we ensured that there's now 4 additional housing units that are going to be able to provide housing for someone in this area for decades to come instead of decade.
No, that's a really good point. Yeah, we buy some pretty messed up stuff sometimes, but I mean, somebody's got to do it.
Absolutely.
So,
That's
so putting Stan and Sierra on the spot right now. So Curtis, PE turned RE, is asking, will Sierra and Stan be at the Vegas event next year?
Depends on the dates and depends if I'm available.
What?
I really did want to go this year. I'd love to be able to go to that event at some point, but it always comes down to what the schedule is. If it's happening while I'm on my normal job offshore, then I won't be able to take time off to go to that. If it's happening during Mardi Gras, that's way too busy for us, for me to leave the area during that. So it just purely comes down to if my schedule allows, then I'll definitely make an effort to go.
Yeah, I'm planning to be there next year. I would love to be back.
Yeah, we missed you this year. I mean, it was still fun, but we did miss you this year. It was actually a lot of fun. The community is just growing and bonding and getting a lot closer. So, yeah, arriving earlier and leaving later definitely helped out also. Oh, Stan, looks like wrong answer. Gotta make it happen.
See what I
Uh,
can do.
and of course, Dylan's hair. Max
Oh,
says on point. How long did it take you to get your hair ready for today, man? That's what I
this is
want to know.
on. This is honestly like 2 minutes. I've been doing this for like 12 years now. I don't even think about it anymore.
All right. Let's see. Yeah. What? So I don't know. Anything else you guys want to talk about?
Actually, I did just think of another point that I wanted to bring up in terms of zoning. Most of the zoning that we talked about was geared towards multifamily, with so much of the zoning being just single family. But even the single family zoning is providing problems to housing affordability. Essentially, and I'm not sure if it's area, but many areas, the zoning for single family homes requires a lot to be a specific size. If a lot is specific size, that puts in an automatic fixed cost for that land. Any kind of contractor, they are pretty much forced into a situation where they need to build a home at a specific size in order to make sure they can recoup their costs and still maintain some profit to keep their business going. If the property, essentially, if you have a property this big, you can't exactly build a home this big and put it on the market because you're not going to make money that way. So there's essentially, you're forcing contractors to build certain size homes. If you're building certain size homes, that means you have to sell them at a certain price into the market. You don't have the option to build smaller homes that could be more affordable if the lots aren't allowed to be smaller to make room for those smaller homes.
Good point. I feel like if you look at a lot of the new development, like we had one of those build to rent communities that got put in pretty recently that I don't know who's doing these, but it's one of the bigger builders and then selling them off to like BlackRock and stuff like that as just a rental portfolio. But like nobody's building like the houses that I would consider like an affordable house for somebody to buy, like a 2 bedroom or 3 bedroom, 1 bath, like 12 or 1300 square feet. Like a lot of these are like McMansions, quote unquote. They're like 3,500 square feet. Just too much house that like some people don't even need that much to, live in the first place. But they're just trying to get a return on the houses that they're building.
Oh, absolutely. And it's kind of comes out to what I said, like they're forced to build them that high, like that large. Because if you can't build them that large, you can't sell them at a certain price and still recoup the cost of the land, the cost of permitting. Even before you put shovel in the ground, you have to take into account the price of the land, which can be substantial. You have to take into account the price of their permitting, which can also be substantial. So those are all fixed costs that need to be factored in. And if you can't build a house of a certain size and quality to be able to sell and recoup both the construction and those initial land costs and permitting costs, the house won't be built if it's not economically feasible to build it.
Yeah. What do you guys think about? I know one thing I've heard Dion talk about a few times is like, hey, so if you see the main city center, like go out about 45 minutes or go out an hour from there and see what the house prices are. Cause like I was looking at stuff like I live near Indianapolis. An hour outside of Indianapolis, you can buy houses for like 70, 80, $100,000. It's not in like area with a ton of development and everything, but like I still feel like people can reasonably get into those like that housing. Of course they're going to have a drive, but if they don't want to rent and they do want to buy a house, like there's plenty of cities, at least around me, that are affordable enough for I would say pretty much anyone to buy a house.
And that's definitely the case in many cities across the country as well. But the problem is, like, that's kind of goes back to that suburban sprawl where back in the 70s and 80s, where people wanted to move out of the inner cities, they wanted to go out to suburbs, they wanted like the white picket fence with the big lawn, like that was what was trendy at the time. So everyone was leaving the city and they wanted to go out to these more rural areas. But now the market is reversing. All the people that used to go out into the suburbs, now they're trying to move back into the city. So yeah, there's a reason the houses there are so much cheaper, is that they simply, the market for them is not as high as those urban centers. I definitely agree that if someone really wants to rent, moving to these other places is a very good step to take. I think it was saw a quote from Barbara Cohen. I don't know if you guys are familiar with her. She's on
Mhm.
Shark Tank, real estate developer, investor. I can't remember the exact quote from her, but it was something along the lines of, if you want to get on the housing market, you need that first step. Like, no matter whether it's a small studio, whether it's a tiny house in the middle of nowhere, you need that first step, because getting that first step, you essentially get a entry level chip that you can then trade into something else in the future. Because now you have something, an asset that's building equity, that you're paying down debt on, that it's building equity that's rising in price. So now when you're ready to trade up into something more ideal for you, you have something to trade up into. So it's kind of a case of, you need a first step on the ladder to be able to get to a more ideal property in the future. But I think it's a case where not a lot of people are willing to make that initial step, because that initial step isn't ideal for them. It's not what they think is the perfect scenario. Like, they want to be close to work, they want to live in the perfect neighborhood, like they want that stuff right off the bat, rather than taking that entry level and then within 10, 20 years maybe work their way up to that perfect like setup.
Sierra Hyder says you missed meeting his son. Both kids should be there next year. Are you thinking of bringing your son, possibly?
Maybe. Are you going to bring yours?
I don't think the mom's gonna let me. She already told me there's nothing for him to do in Vegas. So
Yeah, Vegas is not really, kid friendly in a lot of senses. So, but I don't know. I would be open to bringing him at least to the event part. I would like a babysitter for when I would like to go out and socialize or have dinner. But I'm sure he would think it's fun. He's a good traveler.
yeah, as long as he has his iPad.
Yeah.
That's all I need.
uh, yeah, Hyder says be happy to have hair. I'm assuming that's you, Dylan. A good accessory. I don't have that problem. But we got Hugo here. Stay with you, Pod. Thanks for stopping by. Let's see. Love the Vegas event. Let's see. Yep, Jason says, yeah, people are spoiled. They don't want to make that drive a lot of times, right? So, uh, let's see.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback on that, I think, I'm a big proponent of, buying in the smaller towns and having a bit of a drive. I think a lot of people still do that. Um, you have to have a little bit of a longer term vision. I don't know that many people want to make that commitment, and they get worried that they won't get their money back in a shorter amount of time. Like if they are like, I can do this for a couple years. Most people are, don't like that commitment of it. It's a lot of responsibility, and that's a long time to say that I'm gonna commute this far, and maybe my job's not that stable. Like, you have to really say, like, I'm good with this life for a decent chunk of time. And I think when you're in that stage of getting your first home, if you're somewhere in your, like, what, mid 20s, mid 30s, um, life is changing a lot, and it's hard to say that, you can do that particular lifestyle for at least a couple of years. So I think it's hard to do. I think turning those places into rentals is possible. I think there's a lot of people are just too scared to try to make that their asset for the short term.
Makes sense.
Yeah, sorry about that. Speaking of kids, mine was in here playing on his iPad, so I had to lower the volume down a little bit. But yeah, I agree with you in terms of the long-term vision. I think that's a huge problem for a lot of people in terms of them being unwilling to invest. I mean, even when you buy your first property in a lot of areas, you're probably not going to make that much money right away if you buy like on day one. You buy a property day one, it'll definitely pay off if you're willing to sit on it and keep running it out for the next 5, 10 years. It can become a substantial asset. But for that, probably first couple of years, you're looking at all the responsibility of maintenance. You're looking at all the responsibility of trying to find tenants, manage tenants. You're looking at all the responsibility of repairs. And in a lot of cases, you're doing that all for $100, $200, $300 profit per month in actual cash flow. So that's like a lot of times with real estate or any kind of investment, you really need that long term outlook where you go, okay, I'm going to make my life intentionally less comfortable and much harder right now, so that in 10 years, my life will be substantially easier at that point. Like rent is going to continue to go up. I'm sure a lot of people don't really like to hear that part, but historically, even when housing has gone down in the past, which even that hasn't happened very often, even during those times, rent has still continued to go up in most areas. Where, yeah, right now maybe you're only making that 300, but you have to hold on to it for 10 years, and by that point, your mortgage hasn't changed or hasn't changed that much, but your rent has going to continue to go up. But you still need that. You need to get through that year one to make it to that year 10.
Yeah. I think another thing that might get people a little bit excited is like if you can make the deals work now, at these rates, like I bought one of my properties at like 7.375 is my interest rate on it. Like if you can make deals work now at those rates, when we get back down to the fives, whether that's in a year, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, like just imagine how much better your cash flow will be because, rents have gone up and you can decrease your payment on a monthly basis. Like it's a huge difference, at least when I was looking at the math on like what I would be making for like then versus what I'm making now. Even if it's at $200 or $300 a month now, like in 5 years, that could be closer to $500 or $600 a month, just depending on where it is.
That's absolutely. Right now, it's definitely because the interest rates where they're at. It's very, very difficult to really, between the interest rate and the fact that housing is simply more expensive than it was a couple of years ago. It's very difficult in most of the country to find cash flowing properties on day one. I'm lucky, like I'm fortunate in the area we live in. It's definitely possible to still find those. Maybe not so much now, but 2, 3 years ago when I was purchasing most of my properties, it was definitely very possible if I'm being selected to find cash flowing properties on day one. But if I look back those same properties now with the interest rate that as they are now, I'd be lucky if I can even break even. I'd probably have to take a bit of a loss for the first couple of years if I'm trying to find properties with the current interest rates. But like I said, if you can make them work now, there's the deals are still definitely out there. Like good markets, bad markets, there's always deals to be had. But in markets like this, it takes far, far more work to find those good deals.
Dylan, did you pair your channel before the live?
I did. I
Okay,
did.
so these may be your followers popping in. There's a comment from FBI. It says, "Is that Drake at the top?" And then FBI also says Nikki 30 at the second bottom. So that's you, I'm assuming. Uh, Yeah. Uh, let's see what else.
I think this is another like what you guys are talking about, another way that landlords are benefiting the housing market is because if you think about the ones who have been in the game for a while, um, who have the ability to finance to new investors, and you're doing the networking, like, and you're able to make a deal that way, and kind of bypass some of these interest rates and net. I don't know, like, I'm just thinking those connections, like, they're making a lot of that possible. There's a lot of landlords who are ready to exit and are ready for their to be the bank essentially, right? And they're making it possible for new investors. And there's a lot of landlords who will sell or finance their property to their tenant when their tenant is ready to buy. So I think those might be unicorns, or maybe they're not, and you just have to talk and get to know people to find the ones that are doing it. But they do benefit the housing market in that way.
Yeah. Like in one of the neighborhoods that not too far from me, I can actively like driving through there on every couple months. I see more renovations happening. Like a lot of the houses there, I wouldn't feel safe even walking into them. Like the roof is ready to collapse in. It looks like the entire house is at an angle because the foundation is so bad. But even in the last couple of months compared to a year or two ago, I'm seeing those houses in poor, like in absolutely poor shape. But now, as I'm driving through in the last couple of months, I'm seeing like people are tearing these houses down or they're repairing them, but they're bringing these dilapidated buildings back into the market. Is chances are, I guess the rent for them is going to be substantially higher now compared to what they were a couple years ago. But what's the alternative? It's would you rather have a higher rented property that someone does have the option to move into that is usable, or do you prefer having a completely dilapidated property that no one has access to? Like one way or another, there needs to be like there is a very major supply shortage in the U.S. like in the U.S. housing market. I think some of the lower estimates I've seen are 4 million, a deficit of 4 million houses in the U.S. market. Some of the estimates I've seen are about 7 million, but there is definitely a deficit of housing in the U.S. market. Anyone, whether it's an investor, whether it's a contractor, even if it's someone making a build to rent community, it's still someone coming into an area and adding additional housing to the market for people to either buy or rent. Either way, that's providing housing for someone that is definitely needed.
All right, just I want to answer Hugo real quick. And I can't do that right now. Trying to turn it on, but I'll try and turn it on later. I am going live again at 3 p.m. Eastern with PTO for Life will be on, and Tom Brickman, the Frugal Gay, should be on, and they're going to recap their time being on stage at the ORAD event. So 3 p.m. Eastern, going live again. I'll try and turn on that Jewel stuff and see if it works. But um, let's see what else. I saw something that I wanted to. Someone made a comment. Oh, here, Dion Wannabe said, I asked the people that I know who think I'm making a mistake, family and friends, I asked them if they think rent will be higher or lower 5 years from now. They all say higher. And then, that's kind of his easy reason to be like, well, why am I making a mistake, right? So,
Nah, he's absolutely right. It's especially if you're in large city centers, chances are the rent's going to continue to go up as more like unless all of a sudden a city has a drastic decline in the population. There's definitely factors that can cause rent to go down. I remember when I first started, and I believe I don't remember exactly what year it was. I believe 2010, 2011, when I was renting in Lafayette. That was shortly after the Macondo incident for deep shore drilling, where there was the oil rig. There was a blowout. The entire thing sank, and because of that, there was a moratorium on offshore drilling. Because the area I was living in Lafayette, it was so heavily tied to offshore drilling as a revenue source that the fact that offshore drilling was no longer allowed caused a major economic downturn in that specific area. So my rent within 1 year went from, I believe it was 1150 down to 850 within 1 year when it was time to renew. So there's definitely factors such as that, especially if you live in a area that doesn't have a diversified economy, that can drag rental down very, very quickly. Like, if the local plant shuts down that's providing jobs for the area or something along those, or if an area suddenly becomes less popular to live in for one reason or another, and there's a giant population migration out of the area, that can also drag down prices. But more often than not, I would say that rent is going to continue to go up because population is going to continue to grow within the United States. We are still at the point where we're growing year over year, the world population as well as the U.S. population. So as long as the population keeps growing, there's going to be a increasing demand on housing.
Hold on, there's a question I believe that Dylan can answer, or I think it's a target it's geared towards him. Let's see. Do you have any strategies for finding those landlords, or is it just networking locally?
So it's really a mix of both. So like Stan had talked about networking with brokers. Um, I think that's one avenue that you can go down. You should definitely talk to a lot of brokers in your area to see like what they have, because there's a lot of things that they're going to shop around before they ever go to list it, to see if anybody is interested in the property. Another thing that I've done is I actually went to college with a guy that's he works in CRE, commercial real estate for some firm up north, and he's in acquisitions. And he'll send me stuff that they're not interested in because it's too small, because they like to buy like the 50 or 100 unit buildings. And I'm like, hey, if you get a 5 or a 10, or a 15 or something like that, let us know, because it's something we want to look at. And then the third way that I am really looking for these is just calling the owners, honestly. I mean, you're going to get people like, mad that you're calling in the first place. I mean, it's just like wholesaling. You're you're going to talk to a bunch of people. A bunch of people aren't going to like you, but finally one person says, yeah, come check out the property. And I mean, if you really want to try to dive down in that strategy, I would honestly go check out some of the videos that Cody and Christian have done on how they do that, because they have a particular way that they structure meeting with the owners. Like in their case, they wouldn't even approach the owner as if they're wanting to buy the property. What they'll do is approach the owner and ask them how they bought the property, ask them to meet up for coffee so they can learn about how they built their business and so on. So they can build a relationship with the owners. And some point down the line, or even then, sometimes they're finding that people will sell them their properties like right there, if not in a few years. So that's really a few different ways that I would attack that. In my opinion, do you guys have anything on that?
I've got a couple of strategies to add to it. Aside from just the brokers and the owners, another option that's become more popular is trying to talk to wholesalers. With wholesalers, they're essentially an entire business that developed that. They're out there professionally going out, finding willing buyers, getting properties under a contract, and then selling the right to that contract to investors or to someone else. The downside to a wholesaler is they don't have the fiduciary duty or same regulations that a realtor does. So there's a more risk. But if you're like working with wholesalers that have experience, that are that you vetted, or that you are is within your network that were referred to you, that is definitely a good source of potential real estate deals to go with. I had another one that I was thinking. Driving for dollars is another probably like popular strategy, where if you just get in your car, start driving around the neighborhoods, if you notice that there's some houses here that are not in the best condition, it doesn't look like anyone's taking care of them. That could be someone that's one that doesn't really care about the property, is willing to unload it. Like if the grass looks hasn't been cut in weeks, if doesn't look there's any new paint, if the house looks like it's falling down, that's probably someone that you can reach out to and see if they're willing to unload that property.
Yeah. Oh, well, even on that, like just the driving for dollars, at least in my area, I was surprised driving around how much multifamily there actually is in my town, whether it's duplexes, tris, quads, or like up to the 10, 20 unit buildings. Like there's way more than I had initially thought, just like going through Zillow, because you'll see a couple things post on Zillow here and there, but like actually driving down, maybe writing down the addresses. I know there's some apps for that. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but you can, write down all those addresses and then go figure out the owners' names and then get their phone numbers and call them. It's another way to do that.
Hugo has a good question. You think deportations will make housing more affordable in your markets or no impact?
That's a tough question.
I think it really depends on what market
Yeah.
you're in. I think that's
Yeah,
the biggest factor. Yeah.
it would have to be a substantial part of the market to make an impact, I think. And I can't imagine realistically deportation happening in such a significant amount in one specific spot that it would impact in that way. Jobs, probably. Housing, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's very, very difficult to gauge because, like, in theory, that would cause a less demand on the market, which in theory would drive down prices. But in practice, I, I'm just can't see a scenario where it would reduce demand on the market by that scale to have really substantial or noticeable changes. Right now, there's other factors that are causing housing prices to go down. I'm not sure on a national level, but locally, we have seen housing prices that haven't necessarily gone down, but they've definitely been at a baseline for the last year where they just kind of flatline and they're staying in like this one little limbo zone. But a lot of it simply comes down to the fact that the mortgage rates are so high that there's a lot less demand for housing, simply because there's less people that are able to afford buying a house at the current interest rates.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen stuff in my market like be taken off the market for that exactly. Like people just aren't buying their houses. That being said, I've started to reach out to some of those people that I've seen their listings go down afterwards, just to see if they are interested in selling at a more reasonable price, because it seems like the list really high, and at least to me, because I'm trying to buy it to make sense as a rental. Um, but with it being multifamily, I mean, that's what we're all doing in the first place. So just going back to some of those people that I've seen take their listings off and see if they're open to an offer or seller finance. Like I found a few that bought their stuff back in like 2011 to 2008, like during the housing crisis, that have bases of like 30 grand for a house. And I'm like, hey, you can come down from 350 to 275. We can make this work.
Yeah, it's 2008. That was one of those spots in history with retrospect that was an amazing time to get into the housing market. Who at the time no one wanted to buy because everyone was thought that the price of houses would just drop down to zero. Everyone was panicking. Everyone was selling in mass. Interest rates were very, very low. House prices were dropping. So there's many people who became millionaires, multimillionaires, decamillionaires purely from being able to get into the housing market during 2008 to 2011. To be honest, I also think that another good time, maybe not as good as 2008 from an investor standpoint, but 2020 to 2021/22, when interest rates were very, very low, I think that was another phenomenal time to get into the real estate market. So I think 10 years from now, people might be looking back at that point in time as the probably should have bought stage.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that. I know one of the main issues with 2008 was that you had to have a lot of liquidity
Yeah.
because people were not loaning on anything. So like the people that I knew that bought houses, that was like taking money out of 401k or whatever they had to buy as many houses as they could during that time period. Because they were buying them for $30,000, $40,000. And now those same houses are worth like 160, 200, 250, like just depending on how the house is set up.
This might have been you, Dylan, right? Oh, no, you probably weren't in eighth grade at that time. I love those. I love those memes where people say they wish they were buying real estate in 2010 to 12 instead of being in
I
eighth
was 12.
I was just graduating college then.
Yeah, I bought in 2012. I was in college though. That was the first house.
I think a lot of it really comes down to being able to understand the market enough to know an opportunity when it comes up to you. Because in 2010, 2012, no one was saying everyone should go out and buy houses. No one was saying houses are a good investment. The people who were buying were the people who looked past that and were able to say, okay, because of these market conditions, this is a good investment, despite what the popular media or popular pundits were saying at the time. It's kind of the same thing that happened. Like most of my purchases I bought in 2020 to 2021. At the same time, no one was saying that housing is a great investment. No one was like, I was able to look at the market and go, okay, interest rates are very, very low right now. This is likely a once in a lifetime opportunity in terms of interest rates. At the same time, there's a lot of stimulus money that's going to the market that's going to drive up inflation. So within the next couple of years, housing prices are likely going to go up. So I was able to identify the fact that housing is a good opportunity in 2020, 2021, before it actually became, before housing affordability became a news story at all. So a lot of it really comes down to being able to understand the economics behind investing in order to identify investments before they become mainstream news.
Well, I want to thank Dylan for coming on last minute. Somebody
No
canceled, so
worries.
I asked him last minute, but we'll get you on like a regular interview because that way people can hear more about your story first and then dig deeper into what you're working on. And it's always good getting Sierra back on, so hopefully you'll make it a regular thing again. But yeah, we could if you guys got anything else, because I gotta blow my nose pretty soon. But if you guys if you guys got any other topics you guys want to talk about, I might hop off camera real quick. Um, but yeah, I don't know anything else. Sierra, are you still making merchandise or anything, or
Mm,
not right now?
it depends on a case by case basis, I guess, but um, not like consistently. No,
Okay, I won't send them your way then.
no, no, don't do that.
Well, anything else? If not, tune in at 3 p.m. Eastern, and then you can hear Jeff and Seleka, PTO for life, and Tom Brickman, the frugal gay. Yeah. So
Um, I would say just as a last thing, if somebody's looking at getting into commercial real estate, just since that's something that I've really focused in on over the past few years, and want you want somebody to like double check the numbers and look at what you're looking at to see if it makes sense, you can reach me on Instagram. It's just my name together. Just shoot me a DM. I'm happy to go over numbers or see if see if it makes sense or if you might be missing something on the deal. No expert. It'll have to be like a 15 or a 20 unit or something like that I'm looking at because outside that scope, there's a lot of other things that start to happen that you have to account for. But yeah, if you're looking at anything, I'm happy to help.
yeah.
Piggyback off the multifamily, I'm not seeing as many deals in the market yet, but I'm predicting within the next year or two, there's probably going to be more deals coming to the market. Uh, with commercial real estate, they're not fixed rate mortgages like in residential real estate. They're typically going to be 5 year adjustable mortgages. So a lot of the commercial real estate was purchased in 2021 to 2022 range when interest rates were very, very low. So when you look at those initial rounds, say that 2021, the interest rate should begin adjusting around the end of this year, going to 2026. So I think that's when the properties are going to start hitting the market once the interest rates are readjusting and the commercial real estate is now underwater in terms of cash flow. So I think there's definitely potential to be made coming in the next couple of years.
So, just one thing on the fixed rate thing. I did a 5-1 just because of where rates are, because I foresee them going down. But my bank actually told me, and I can give everybody the bank just so you can get in contact with them too, that they will do a 20-year fixed.
Oh,
If you
nice.
contact them and ask them about it, yeah, you have to put 25% down, I believe, for them to do something like that. But it's just Greenfield Banking Company, and their website is gbcbank.com. They will
Okay.
do 20-year fix for you.
Very nice.
Yeah. So
And
it
that's the
takes
national lender.
uh they're a community bank, but I'd reach out and see if they can do something for you. They've been
Okay.
really their commercial side has been really helpful for me and like anything that we've been looking at.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
trying to get a 20-year fixed on a commercial, that's a major advantage.
Yeah, well, it takes a lot of the cyclicality out of it because if you think about commercial real estate, like that's what destroys a lot of people's businesses is the cyclicality of rates. So if you can just remove that piece, I mean, like there shouldn't be any defaults and stuff like that. And I think that maybe the way the bank is looking at it too, where it's safer for them as well if they don't adjust us all the time, and we're just willing to take a little bit of a higher rate to fix it for 20 years.
All right. So there's Dylan's channel again. So go check it out, see what he's up to. And this was a fun one. And you guys can all stick around once I end the stream and then see everyone at 3 p.m. Eastern, hopefully. All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.